Hey guys, I hope everyone is doing well today. So today we're going to be doing something a little bit different. We're going to see how this goes. I'm going to be doing a reaction response video where I directly listen to a video with you guys and give you guys some of my feedback on what I think about the different arguments and points Twice Baked Jake is making in this video. As you guys know, I love having people on the channel. But because I can't get everyone on the channel, I do think I am going to start making some of these reaction videos as long as people like them and they feel like I'm not ripping off on their content too much and that it's fair game and useful and productive. I think I will probably do this occasionally when a video like this one sparks my interest or attention. So I guess just a little bit of a preface before we jump into the video. I'm going to watch the video with you guys and then I'll pause it periodically and comment a little bit on what Jake is saying. I like this video. I like Jake's channel. I think it's a great channel. I do think particularly for people who are kind of finding their footing a little bit in this hobby, giving really good overviews. Jake sharing his sort of experience, his opinions on what's worked for him, on what's made him sort of enjoy the hobby in a format that I don't think goes over people's heads who and I think a lot of content on my channel and maybe some other channels, it can be useful and valuable for people who've been in the hobby a long time and maybe are a little bit more familiar with the lingo. Whereas I think Jake's channel, although gives really good, sophisticated detail and talks about things in a helpful way, I think that the lingo he uses and the way he speaks is maybe more digestible for a newer audience, which is vitally important to the hobby because there's got to be a way for people to feel comfortable and welcomed and be able to sort of learn and then go down the rabbit hole as they become more and more experienced and learn a bunch of the lingo that a lot of us throw around on channels like mine. So let's jump into this. The video is titled, "Should You Invest in Vintage or Modern?" All right, let's jump in.
Hey everybody, Jake here and welcome to the hobby. Today we're going to be talking about modern Pokemon cards and vintage Pokemon cards. Which one should you be collecting? What are the pros and cons of each? If you asked any Pokemon card collector 3 years ago, what Pokemon card should you be collecting? They would smack you on the head and say, what are you, stupid? You only collect vintage. Don't trust modern stuff. It's all trash. It's all going to go to zero. None of it is worth anything. And things have completely changed.
So I think that that's a little bit of a misleading start. I think that he has, there's some decent point to be made there, but to say that collectors or that people who are involved in the hobby didn't like modern, I know I and many people and the majority of people, and you can go on E4 and look at old threads and all sorts of things. We were constantly following the new sets, and you certainly had some people who really didn't like the new sets and just wanted to collect the stuff that was more nostalgic and connected to them. But you had people like me and many people who collected every set and bought and opened every set and loved seeing what Pokemon was doing and following it very closely. Now that's different than, was modern Pokemon investable, or was it worth investing your money in Pokemon versus investing your money into vintage? I.e., would you make more money putting your money in vintage, or would you make more money if you put your money in modern? And the reality is you would have at that time made a lot more money putting your money in vintage, because when we think about 3-4 years ago, the prices on a lot of these vintage cards, you could get first edition WotC Hollows, PSA 9s and PSA 10s, some for 25, 30, 40, 50 bucks that are, selling for many hundreds. If you had bought those same modern Sun and Moon Rainbow rares, for example, that would have been the modern cards at those times, or going into the XY, some of those full arts, which have certainly, particularly the early generation stuff, those things are not by and large $200, $300, $400, $500. There's certain Pokemon that are definitely going to be exceptions in that, although a lot of those were selling for a lot of money even when they first came out, like the Rainbow Rare Charizard from Burning Shadows, for example. So it's a little bit misleading. And I do think that there's a bit of this unfortunate narrative that started in the hobby of where like there are people gatekeeping. It's like, you can't like modern if you like vintage, or you can't like vintage if you like modern, when I think in reality, most of us like everything and enjoy everything for different reasons. And in that sense, I think Jake and I would agree here that, collecting what you like and people not being bullies about what you should enjoy, what you shouldn't enjoy. And that's part of the confusing thing, I think, a little bit of this video. Is it asking what should we collect or what should we invest in, and what financially is actually done the best? And so we'll kind of break that down as we go through.
Current scene for Pokemon cards is now really vibrant, and there are a ton of really high value and precious modern Pokemon cards with just the most fantastic artwork. So let's discuss that. When it comes to...
So that point is definitely true. Modern Pokemon now has a lot more high value cards than it did before. So if we want to look at kind of before the Logan Paul boom, or however we want to talk about, if we want to look at sort of the Sun and Moon era, there was really only one card to me that stood out as being worth hundreds and hundreds of dollars, and that is the Rainbow Rare Charizard from Burning Shadows. That was the only card that in a PSA 10 was selling for thousands, and a Black Label was selling for many, many, many thousands. Whereas now we look at the sets and you see PSA 10s of lots of modern cards selling for multiple hundreds of dollars, even up to $1,000 in some cases, and not just the Charizard. And so that definitely is a big change. There's definitely a lot more interest in the hobby generally. Now, of course, we also see vintage is much, much more expensive than it was a few years ago. So what I would say is the whole hobby seems very healthy, and there seems to be a lot of enjoyment and interest, and that is being reflected in the prices that we're seeing across the board. So Jake is definitely right that there's a big change now where you're seeing many cards be worth $20, $30, $40, $50, even multiple $100 right out the gate.
Any hobby, as it matures, there comes a point when both modern and vintage becomes their own scene. There's enough time span passing between the two that now you have pretty much two scenes. This is super common with just about any hobby. Look at something like baseball cards or basketball cards. You got cool vintage cards like Babe Ruth and Michael Jordan going for hundreds of thousands to millions of dollars. But then you also have the modern ones like Mike Trout and LeBron James, who are players that are still playing, and their cards are also going for hundreds of thousands to millions.
So the one issue or thing I would add with that is that the reason why modern sports cards are so valuable is because they're serialized and they're extraordinarily rare. And so you're getting one of 1, 1 of 5, 1 of 10, 1 of 100 modern cards compared to the vintage sports cards, which didn't have serialized, anything from the 70s, 60s, 80s, up and for the most part into the 90s too, although there's some as you get later on. That is very reflected in the prices. I can tell you if modern Pokemon ever does serialized modern cards, I think you're going to see modern Pokemon cards selling for much more than any vintage set card. Not probably some of the trophies and, maybe the first edition PSA 10 Charizard from base set, might rival it, but it would also depend on which Pokemon. But if they had like a 1 of 1 or a 1 of 10 Charizard that came out, the first ever serialized Pokemon card, I think it could set records for the price of a set card. His other point about there being two separate hobbies, again, I don't think that is necessarily true. Many people in sports, in comic books, in Yu-Gi-Oh, in Pokemon, in Magic, collect vintage and modern and love the whole thing. Now, of course, he is right that there are going to be some people who focus more in one or the other, but I don't think that needs to be something that needs to be a forced sort of choice there. There's a lot, and there's affordable stuff, particularly in Pokemon. There's very affordable vintage stuff. There's very affordable modern stuff. There's very expensive vintage stuff and very expensive modern stuff. So there's lots of different options in terms of collecting. But again, we're not really talking about investing yet or what is going to financially do the best or going to get you the biggest return, which I think we'll get into as the video goes on.
Of dollars. So there's plenty of value in either market. And the Pokemon card scene is reaching the point of maturity where there's a separation between the two, where you have this continuous scene of vintage Pokemon cards, but there is now a growing scene of modern collectors that is just the Wild West, and it's completely different. It's new, it's fresh, and it's fun. So let's talk about the pros and cons of each. Vintage.
I think he's definitely right in the sense that I would guess and tend to agree that there are more people who are just interested in modern, is the way that I would phrase it. I think before would have been very, very few people who were interested in just modern and not vintage. And that I think the majority of people liked modern and vintage. Now I think you have a lot more people who aren't particularly interested in vintage. And that could be because they really don't like it. They prefer the art of the modern. It could also be because it's expensive. Vintage is expensive. And it's just easier. It could be because they really like opening packs and that's how they want to collect. And the only way to do that affordably is to do it in modern. I think all of those reasons are super legitimate and understandable.
Pokemon cards, they're iconic, they're memorable, they're nostalgic, and they smell like your mom's cooking because that's how you remember it. Vintage Pokemon cards are some of the safest collectibles when it comes to the Pokemon hobby. A big part of it is that the people that have these vintage collectibles don't like to sell them, especially the super rare stuff. Something like a first edition base set booster box, that thing is never dropping in price. And a big part of it is that the people who have these collectibles are just not willing to sell them. No matter how much the market declines, they just...
So that's very dangerous advice and is not true. We've seen a number of first edition base boxes sell this year, some for lower prices. We've seen a number of, there's another Pikachu Illustrator coming up. We've seen a lot of snap cards, a lot of trophy cards. Everything can go down in value, even if it's a very rare item. So although I think Jake's about to make a really good point, which I agree with, and I'll let him do it in a sec, but I do think that, that feels a little bit like that guarantee stuff of like, if you buy this very expensive item, because it's very expensive and very rare, like it won't go down in price, where we've seen plenty of items that were over $20,000, $15,000, $20,000, $30,000 have in price over the last 6 months, just like we've seen a lot of modern have in price or even greater. So just because something is very rare, and as Jake's about to say, which is a really smart point, that the people who own it don't need to sell it because they're wealthier and can afford it and afford to hold it. It doesn't mean that some of it won't come back out and won't sell, particularly in a year like this year, when a lot of the people who own these very expensive Pokemon cards bought them for so cheaply that they themselves are not actually very wealthy. And so them selling it now is life-changing money for them, which is why a lot of them did sell, not because they wanted to sell particularly, but because the amount of money that they could get back was so life-changing that it was best for them in their life to make that sale and put that money to other things. So I do think Jake is right, though, that over time, as the hobby gets more and more wealthy and more of these cards find their way into the Logan Pauls, into the people who have $100 million or $50 million, these types of things, that it's much less likely to change hands a bunch of times, particularly if these people are collectors and not flippers and that sort of thing. So Jake and I definitely would agree on that.
Sell them, mainly because they don't have to. The people that own these super expensive products are very well off. And if the market ever drops in price, they just simply won't sell them. They have a price inside of their head and they'll sell them when they reach that price point. If it doesn't reach that point, no big deal. They just never sell. So that's why the vintage Pokemon card market is very consistent, especially the sealed products. They don't really decline in value. They will just slowly climb in value over the next couple of years.
So again, not what's happened, right, over the last 6 months. So it is dangerous for people. We've seen like the base set booster box go from 35,000. I've seen some sold between 12 and 15,000 in just a few months. Could they go down even more? They absolutely could. These are not rare items. Most of these sealed product booster boxes, there are tens and tens and tens, if not 100,000 of them out in the world. Now versus the first edition base set booster box, which definitely is a considerably rarer item, but all of the other booster boxes, for example, including even into the original Nintendo EX era, which there's still, I think, more of those than people really think. There's definitely quite a bit less of those out there than a unlimited base set would be. So little bit, I just want to put that out there that, making, these very huge purchases, particularly if you're putting a humongous amount of your net worth in it. I'm not telling you that booster box won't appreciate in value. I think that there's a decent chance that it will, and that Pokemon will do well and the values will continue to go up. but don't go in it with this sort of irrational exuberance. We talk about it on this channel of like, I cannot possibly lose money on this because, you know, this type of product only goes up.
If you're into something that's super consistent, super safe, vintage collectibles tend to be some of the best one. However, the con of it is that it's a little bit boring. There's no news that is going to come out when it comes to vintage Pokemon cards. There's no additional information that you're ever going to find out about first edition base set, Jungle, Fossil, Neo series, or the E series. Everything that's known about these sets have been pretty much the same over the last couple of years. There's no new information flowing around. The market for these are kind of set in stone. The most popular cards are going to remain the most popular cards pretty much forever. There's never going to be a point when a new most popular card is going to shift. That is where the modern market is really differentiating itself from the vintage market, where things are completely different. There are new cards that are consistently moving around on what is the most popular cards in every single set. The most popular card on a specific set today might not be the most popular card the next day. It completely shifts. When it comes to modern Pokemon cards, things are just constantly moving. Let's give you guys some example. Ultra Prism and Cosmic Eclipse. The most expensive cards from these two sets were the Solgaleo GX, Secret Rare from Ultra Prism, and the Hyper Rare Charizard and Brexen Tag Team GX card from Cosmic Eclipse. These cards were the most expensive cards in these sets for over a year. And then four trainer cards became very popular, and these two cards actually got dethroned. The most expensive card inside of Ultra Prism now is the Lily Full Art, and the most expensive card inside of Cosmic Eclipse is now the Rosa Full Art. So
yeah, I think Jake is absolutely nailing this point, and did great research here to and really is able to show the audience some really good concrete examples to understand that. It's something that I try to talk about a lot. You know, when you're right now, everyone really, really loves alternative arts. It's sort of the thing, right? Before, everyone really loved the Shining cards, the Shiny Vault from Hidden Fates and Shining Fates. But people's taste can change. Demand is very difficult to predict. And Jake makes a really interesting argument here, which is that that's part of actually what makes modern fun. We could make the counter argument that it's also what makes modern a bad investment or a risky investment, because you're not sure. You know, generally when we think about investment, we probably don't want like really high risk or really difficult to predict stuff. It's part of why I think it's a little bit more risky to invest possibly in modern, but there can also be a lot of upside. So for example, if you realized a year ago or whatever that the full arts, why do people not like trainers? Why do people only like Pokemon? These full arts have beautiful art. They're important Pokemon characters. For whatever reason, you could have taken advantage of that by saying, I actually think that the popularity is going to shift to these, if you could have predicted that, or you had a theory, right? And so I think that I do think Jake's argument about how it makes modern kind of more interesting, or investing in modern more interesting and fun to watch, is a really good one and a really interesting one. And it makes it fun to talk about or have debates about, like, okay, which cards are people going to like in the future? It also is a pretty difficult thing to predict. You know, demand is very hard to predict, and sometimes it's sort of anyone's guess.
Market is constantly shifting. The most popular modern Pokemon cards today might not be the most popular modern Pokemon cards in 2 or 3 years, and the market has definitely shifted. There was a point in time when there were no modern Pokemon cards inside of any sets that are over $100, and now you have sets like Evolving Skies, which have multiple cards going for easily up.
So when you bundle your home and auto, you can save.
Who wants a home and auto bundle Extrava Festa Save-a-thon t-shirt?
Upwards of over $100, and so many more additional cards that are in the $50 to $100 range. It is truly a Wild West scenario. Now, here's the big kicker. 99.9% of modern Pokemon cards are not going to go up in value. They will simply do not. And you're probably thinking, you know which ones will go up in value. And the truth is, no one knows which cards will go up in value. you might have a bunch of Celebrations Charizard inside of your collections, and those are probably a slam dunk is what you're thinking. Now, here's going to be a hard pill to swallow, but personally, one of my bold predictions is that that Charizard will stay under $100 for the next 10 to 20 years. There are so many copies of it out in existence that I don't see it ever gaining traction when there are so many other versions of base set Charizard that are just significantly better. So that is my hot take. Take it how you will. Some people dislike the video over that, but that's an example. You can't really predict which modern Pokemon cards will be the most valuable. I've had some decent luck with things like the Scream promo and Mario Pikachu. Now you can look at those cards and say, well, obviously they went up in value. They are fantastic, but I didn't know that. Most people didn't know that. I've sold Mario Pikachu cards for $100. I've sold Scream promo sets for $200. Those are, of course, now worth thousands of dollars, but I sold them for fair market value 2 years ago, which was $100 or less for some of these cards. So you just simply do not know what is going to go up in value. I collect them because I like the artwork, and that's really all that matters. I was just hoping that they would be valuable someday, and I got very lucky. That is,
I appreciate Jake's transparency and humility here. I do think that Jake probably just because he started an investment channel and talked about this, to give him some credit, he probably did have some insight or foresight that these, just like a lot of us did, and a lot of us bought these cards, particularly the Screams for me. I bought some of the Mario Pikachu, but I just happened to really like the Screams in particular for me. I do also appreciate that he acknowledges that, he didn't necessarily predict that they were going to go up this much. I don't think anyone did. No one expected the hobby to blow up this much, this quick, and certainly didn't expect these cards to go from $30, $10 each, $15, $20 each when Jake was probably buying them, when I was buying them initially, to hundreds of dollars each, up to $1,000, each, depending on the card, or $1,000 plus, depending on which specific card. So I do think his point about, I think he's a little bit almost too humble here, in the sense that I do think that you can pick things if you want to invest or think financially, things that are likely going to do better. And the things that are likely going to do better are things that, you feel like people have a response to, and have a things that people really like. So trying to judge the quality of the art, people's initial response to something, although again, right, it can dramatically change. People were loving and chasing some of those gold cards, and they've really disappeared, from value, and taste do change over time, as Jake illustrated and talked about in this video. But there are lots of examples of where things were really popular initially and really liked, and they still are today and continue to become more and more popular. The objective part of all of this is rarity, and that's one of the key things to talk about here. And when we look at some of the Scream promos or the Mario, Luigi, Pikachu promos, these are not items that I would consider very rare, particularly rare, but I would consider them in modern to be fairly rare. And it's all, and I don't think anyone knows exact print numbers or distribution numbers of these, but it's not going to be the same as, certainly there's going to be much, much less of these than your average holo or your average V card or something like that from a set. Comparing how many of these are going to exist in the world versus like an alternative art, I really don't know. That would be where I would be like, I'm not sure. It'll be interesting to see over time how much come out, how much get graded. These there are quite a few of these in the world and out there. Now, they're very unique. They really stand out. Obviously, the Mario, Luigi, Pikachu ones are a crossover between Mario and Luigi, and people who are big Nintendo fans, and also Mario fans, that could be particularly appealing to them. Could also be appealing to cross collectors, to people who just collect Mario stuff, wanting that. Scream promos really standing out as being a very kind of unique, cool release. So Jake definitely, I think, is a lover of these things, and thus has good taste, generally speaking, probably. And a lot of the things, like when he likes the look of a box, I watch his channel from time to time, and I I mean, I could be wrong too, right? For what it's worth, but I tend to agree with him when he's like, this box looks really beautiful. This box makes a great display case when he's talking about these Japanese products he's looking at. And I think when you combine the relative rarity of some of those boxes and promos to some, modern English cards or modern Japanese set cards, you can see how the combination of probably a lot less supply with probably more demand is going to equal a higher price.
How the modern market work. If you are into a modern Pokemon card, collect it because you love it. Don't collect it because you think it will go up in value, because guess what? You don't know. People simply do not know, and that's part of the fun of it. I think part of the fun of modern Pokemon cards is the mystery element. The scene is constantly evolving and constantly changing. A lot of the collectibles that I have on display over the last couple of years have changed, especially since my taste in Pokemon cards has evolved with the hobby. I used to be a vintage Pokemon card collector only, and over the past couple of years, my display case has really started to push more on the modern side, since I just find that the aesthetic appeals more to me nowadays. And as a collector, I think that's important. I don't think that as a collector, you should be collecting the same item for 20, 30 years. You should evolve, you should adapt with the hobby as it continues to grow. So there are Pokemon cards inside of my collections, modern Pokemon cards, that are very affordable right now. And I'm really rooting for them. Hopefully someday they'll be expensive, and I will be very proud to be one of the few people who own a copy of it. But that's just it. I enjoy having these cards inside of my collection regardless of their value. So take that how you will. Should you be collecting vintage or modern? There really is no wrong answer. There is a completely different scene and dichotomy between the two, whether you want something super consistent and will continuously go up in value pretty much no matter what, or would you prefer taking something a little bit more risky but constantly evolving and constantly changing and never knowing what's going to happen next. They're completely different scenes, and there's legitimacy to collecting either, and it really just comes down to who you are as a collector. And honestly, I've collected both and I enjoy both. There's plenty of validity in both. Depending on what people ask me when they try to join the hobby, I will recommend different things. When they say they're interested in vintage, I say base set unlimited is a great place to begin, because you should collect the original base set. It's a very nostalgic area to begin with. It's a very easy set to get a complete set of, and it's fun. It's very consistent, very simple, and you get a basic understanding of set collecting. For modern Pokemon cards, there's shining fates, there's hidden fates, there's plenty of cool modern Pokemon card sets with really flashy cards that are fairly affordable that I can recommend people to collect depending on what they're into, whether it be full art trainers, rare Charizard cards, or Japanese promos. The scene is just so vibrant right now. All right, everybody, that's the end of today's.
So I definitely agree. I think we'll cut it there. I definitely agree with that final takeaway. I think what gets confusing sometimes is that investing advice? Is that collecting advice? As a collector, I completely agree with Jake that not only do I think it's a little strange when people advise other people that you shouldn't collect something, and we are seeing that a lot these days, like telling people like, you like that thing, weirdo, that's awful. I think that part of that negative energy comes from a conflation between collecting and investing. Now, I think a lot of collectors and people who are primarily just interested in collecting, and frankly, the vast majority of collectors, are interested in the financial piece because they don't have unlimited money and they want to build the biggest possible collection that they can, and they want to buy things at the right time so that they don't spend more money than they need to, these types of things. And also you want to conserve as much money as you can for the rest of your life and for the other things that you're into. And that's where some of that financial talk really comes into play. Getting the cards you want at the best possible time, the best possible deal, is very different than trying to target the cards that are going to grow the most, grow the quickest, grow the biggest percentage. And I think that a lot of people want to do both and have interest in both things. And I think that where the arguments or the debate is happening mostly, or should happen mostly, I should say, is like, what's going to be worth the most money, right? These types of things. And I think it's interesting and fun when it's had respectfully. And when we go into the analysis and the numbers and, what has done the best, what's going to continue to do the best, when should I buy? If I'm interested in this modern set, should I wait a year? Should I wait 2 years to buy it? When should I buy it? Should I buy a ton of it so that I can flip it 3-4 years down the line so I have more money that I can then reinvest back into the hobby? A lot of people who are investing in Pokemon, they're really trying to make money so then they can buy more because they don't have the funds, including myself, to buy all of the cards that they want or that they're after. So they do some of that. Jake himself, right, sells, I think, flips cards, flips into the market, tries to predict what are good buys, what is good value. And so I think that Jake and I are definitely in agreement with that final message. And overall, I think, although as people are going to watch this, they're going to see that I disagreed with certain things, or I wanted to clarify certain things or make certain points. I think it's a great topic, and I think it's a good video. And at the end of the day, we should be happy and encouraged that people like the same stuff that we like and like a broad, diverse array of stuff, and not let our egos or not let our competition about who is going to be right about which is going to go up the most get in the way of our collective enjoyment in the hobby. And that's an important message for all of us, to continuously try and follow. So I'm going to end it there. Thank you all so much for tuning in and watching this video. If you like this video, please subscribe for more. Let me know in the comments what you guys think. This type of thing, doing it for the first time. I had a channel for like a year and a half where I didn't do this, but I thought about doing this at certain times. And I think it's good content. I think it's enjoyable to debate certain things and critique certain things. So we shall see. But please let me know what you think. If you can support me on Patreon, you get exclusive content on there. Monthly videos where we're doing deep dives into the market, into the analytics. We also have a Discord community, private one that comes with that, where we're talking a lot about all this stuff and sharing both our passion and enjoyment of the hobby, as well as talking about, sharing our opinions on where we think the market is going to go in various places. I guess that's it for today, and I will talk to you all again soon. Thanks so much for watching.